I never thought I would become the kind of man who second-guesses the woman he wakes up next to. Distrust always sounded like something that happened far away, in other people's relationships, not in mine. For most of our 3 years together, I carried this quiet confidence that she was mine and I was hers, that the world outside our apartment couldn't pull us apart. I believed we were solid. Ordinary maybe, but solid, steady, predictable in a comforting way. But I guess that's exactly what makes the ground shake, when something small shifts, when a detail feels off, when a moment doesn't sit right. It doesn't start like thunder. It starts like a whisper, and I remember the exact night when that whisper reached me for the first time. It was a Thursday, one of those evenings when the light comes through the kitchen window in a soft, washed-out glow. I was slicing chicken for dinner, tired from work but relaxed. She came in later than usual, keys dropping a little too loudly into the bowl by the door. I didn't turn immediately. I just kept cutting, thinking she would come up behind me like she used to, wrap her arms around my waist, rest her face on my back. But she didn't. Her steps were light but quick, the kind of walk people do when they don't want to be noticed, but they also want to get somewhere fast. She went straight past me, straight to the bedroom, and closed the door. Not slammed, not shut, just closed precisely enough to feel intentional. I stood there for a moment, knife in my hand, listening. No movement, just silence. Weird, I remember thinking. Not suspicious, just weird. I wiped my hands on the towel and walked toward the bedroom, but halfway there she opened the door and stepped out like nothing happened. She forced a smile, the kind that curves the lips but not the eyes. She came up to me, kissed my cheek too quickly, and told me she was tired, that work drained her, that she had a migraine building behind her temples. I believed her. Of course I did. But then she hugged me, and in that hug, I felt something unfamiliar. Not a smell, not a mark, just a tension in her arms, a stiffness, like she wasn't hugging me, just going through the motion of hugging a person she was supposed to love. I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining it. The next morning, she woke before me. That never happened, not on a weekday, not when we both slept terribly. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch with her phone in her hands, screen dimmed. When she heard me approach, she clicked the button so the screen went black. It wasn't suspicious. Not yet, just another whisper. Things like that kept happening in small doses. Little pieces of behavior that didn't match who she used to be. She used to laugh easily. Now she smiled politely. She used to lean into me on the couch. Now she sat at the far corner. She used to leave her phone anywhere. Now it followed her like a shadow. But I kept making excuses on her behalf. Long work hours, stress, maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I needed a break more than she did. Still, something in me stayed alert. Like a hand inside my chest kept tugging at a string I didn't want to see the end of. Then came the night everything tipped sideways. It was almost midnight. She said she'd be home by 9. Team meeting, then drinks. I didn't argue. She worked hard. She deserved to have a life outside our walls. But as the hours stretched, I kept glancing at the clock, then at the door, then at the phone. Her text stopped at 9:47 p.m. I tried not to panic, tried not to build scenarios. But when you love someone, you know their rhythms. Her rhythm changed. When she finally came in, she moved quietly, like she didn't want to wake me. I pretended to be asleep, just to watch. She took off her shoes slowly. She undressed facing away from the bed. She slipped under the blanket without touching me, and her body felt warm. Warmer than it should have been if she came from outside in the cold. My chest tightened. I felt something sharp under my ribs. I should have asked, should have said something. But I stayed silent, listening to her breathe, trying to match her rhythm with my own. The next day, I told myself I imagined it. But the doubt didn't disappear. It settled deeper. The real moment, the first undeniable crack came 2 days later. I walked into the living room early in the morning, half asleep, and saw her phone lying on the table. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't in her pocket or under her pillow. The screen lit up with a notification as I approached. I didn't touch it. I just watched from where I stood. One message preview, a man's name I didn't recognize, and the words, "Last night was." I can't stop thinking about it. My hands went cold. My throat tightened. I didn't breathe. I stared at that screen like it held the last truth I wanted on earth. A part of me wanted to pick the phone up immediately and open everything: messages, photos, call logs, whatever existed, but I didn't. I stepped back instead. The fear wasn't of what I would see, but of what it would turn me into once I saw it. She came out of the bedroom moments later, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. She saw me, smiled faintly, kissed me on the neck, and walked to the bathroom. So casual, so normal. Like nothing in the world was wrong. Her phone buzzed again behind her. I swear my heart stopped. I forced myself to turn away, go to the kitchen, make coffee, breathe in slowly, pretend I didn't see anything, but I felt the shift, a coldness inside my bones, because once a doubt enters you, it doesn't leave. It grows. It sinks deeper. It rewires the way you look at everything, the way you interpret every movement, every word, every pause. All day at work, my mind kept returning to that notification, to that man's name, to the tone of the message. Not friendly, not formal. Something else? Something too intimate, too comfortable, too confident. I tried remembering if she ever mentioned him. She hadn't. On the way home, I rehearsed conversations in my head. I imagined asking her directly, calmly, neutrally. I imagined her laughing it off. I imagined her getting defensive. I imagined her lying. What scared me most was how easily I could imagine her lying. When I walked through the door that evening, she was cooking dinner. Her hair was tied up messily, a few strands falling on her cheek. She looked beautiful, familiar. The same woman I thought I knew so well. But something between us had shifted. Or maybe I had. As she talked about her day, I watched her mouth move, watched her hands stir the pan, watched her eyes shift when she spoke about staying late at work. I tried to match her words with the message I saw. They didn't match, not even close. I kept quiet again. And that silence, the one that formed that day, never really left me. It followed me through the evening, through the shower, through the moment I lay next to her in bed again. I felt her back against my side, warm, relaxed, breathing gently, but I stared at the ceiling, replaying the words over and over. Last night was. I can't stop thinking about it. By then, the whisper wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a pressure in my chest, a steady, suffocating weight, and I knew with a clarity that terrified me that this was only the beginning. I woke the next morning with the same heaviness crawling under my ribs. It wasn't pain, not exactly, more like a tightness that spread inward every time I remembered that message. I stared at the ceiling for a long minute before I forced myself to get out of bed. She was still asleep beside me, breathing softly. Turned away, I watched her shoulder rise and fall, watched the way her hand curled slightly under the pillow. There was a time when that sight made me feel calm, safe. Now I felt something close to dread, not because of what she was doing in that moment, but because of what she might be doing when I wasn't there to see. It's strange how quickly your mind can turn your entire world into a series of clues, a glance, pause, a missing detail. Everything suddenly matters. She stirred, slowly waking, and I forced myself to look away before she opened her eyes. I didn't want her to see the doubt on my face. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed something concrete, because once you accuse someone you love, there's no taking it back. Even if you're right, the moment changes everything. Morning, she said, her voice soft, sleepy, familiar. Morning, I answered, pretending to be distracted by my phone. She sat up, brushing hair from her face, and leaned in to kiss my cheek. I felt her lips, warm and gentle, and all I could think of was whether she had kissed someone else like that recently, last night, any night. My stomach twisted. She went to the bathroom, and I heard the water run. I stared at her pillow, the indentation, the faint smell of her shampoo, things I used to take comfort in. Now they felt unfamiliar, as if they belonged to someone I couldn't trust. On the way to work, my mind kept replaying the message. Not just the words, the tone, the confidence, the casual boldness of someone who clearly didn't fear being discovered. What kind of man writes that to someone who's taken? What kind of woman lets in? I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation, that I was being paranoid, but the more I tried to rationalize, the more the doubt solidified. At lunch, I opened her Instagram for the first time in months. I never cared before, I always trusted her, but that morning, I scrolled through her followers slowly, searching for the name I saw. He wasn't there. Not as a follower, not following her. That made it worse, somehow. Because if he wasn't publicly connected to her, then whatever was happening between them wasn't happening in the open. It was something hidden, something behind a locked screen. My appetite evaporated. I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to work while my head replayed every moment from the last month. The late nights, the sudden guilt in her eyes when I asked simple questions, the way she angled her phone away from me, even when she wasn't typing anything. Once doubt exists, it rewrites your memories. It makes everything look like a sign you missed. When I got home that evening, she was already there, sitting on the couch, phone in her hand, legs tucked under her. She looked up quickly as I came in and locked the screen instantly. Too instantly. "Hey," she said, her voice bright in a way that felt forced. "Hey," I answered, sliding my keys onto the counter. I watched her eyes. She looked at me as if waiting for a reaction, waiting for me to say something about the house being unusually clean, or dinner being half prepared, or her hair being done even though she claimed she stayed home all day. But I said nothing. Silence sometimes reveals more than questions. She got up and wrapped her arms around my waist, pressing her cheek to my chest. I stood there, one hand resting lightly on her back, trying to feel whether her heartbeat matched the rhythm of someone who had nothing to hide. It was steady, too steady. She pulled away first. "How was work?" she asked, turning toward the kitchen. "Fine." I sat on the couch, watching her move. Her motions were too controlled, like she was thinking carefully about every step. She cooked quietly, humming under her breath. But the humming wasn't real, it was a filler sound, something to keep the silence from swallowing us. When we finally sat down to eat, she talked more than usual, about coworkers, about traffic, about a podcast she listened to, a wall of words. I nodded at the right moments, but absorbed none of it. I was too focused on her hands, on her eyes, on the slight tremor in her voice when she asked about my day. After dinner, she said she needed to catch up on some messages. She took her phone to the bedroom and closed the door. That was the moment something in me shifted from suspicion to determination. If she was hiding something, I needed to know. Not next week, not when it was too late. Now. I walked quietly to the hallway and leaned against the wall, listening. Silence, then the faint tap 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 of her typing. I waited. Then I heard her sigh, a long, soft exhale she always made when she texted something emotionally heavy. I stepped closer, careful, stopping just before the door. Another tap tap tap, another sigh. I didn't hear the content, didn't hear another voice, nothing concrete. But sometimes the absence of sound is even worse. I stood there long enough to feel my throat tighten, long enough to realize that whatever she was doing behind that door, she didn't want me to hear. When she finally came out, she jumped slightly when she saw me. "Oh hey, I didn't hear you." She smiled, too wide. "I was just texting Maya. She's having a bad day." Maya, her safest lie, her shield. She always used her when she didn't want to specify who she was really talking to. I didn't call her out, not yet, but I knew she wasn't telling the truth. We spent the rest of the evening together on the couch. She curled into me, head on my shoulder, and resting on my chest. A perfect picture of intimacy, yet I felt nothing but distance. Her affection felt heavier than usual, like she was overcompensating, like guilt had weight. When she fell asleep against me, I carefully lifted her head and laid her onto the pillow. I watched her breathe, watched the faint twitch of her fingers, watched how peaceful she looked. Then her phone buzzed on the coffee table, the vibration cut through the room. I stared at it, pulse pounding. My fingers twitched. I stepped closer, slow, silent, afraid the buzzing would wake her. The screen lit up. Same name, same sender, a new message preview. Are you free tomorrow? I miss you already. My blood went cold. No misunderstanding, no innocent explanation, nothing to rationalize. My hands shook, my breath stilled, my head spun, but everything inside me sharpened at the same time. That was the moment I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living inside doubt without confronting the truth, but I also knew I wasn't ready to expose it. Not yet, not without everything, not without certainty, not without knowing exactly what I was confronting. I needed more. I needed the full picture. I needed to understand the scope of what I was dealing with before I tore my life apart. I sat there staring at the glowing screen, the message burning into my vision. She shifted in her sleep, turning slightly, her hand brushing my leg. I froze, watching her breathe softly, unaware that the fragile life she built had already started collapsing. And I realized something terrifying. The worst part wasn't the possibility that she was cheating. The worst part was how naturally I now believed she was. I picked up her phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. My reflection stared back at me, tired, eyes clenched, jaw. A man who didn't want to become this version of himself. I didn't unlock it. Not yet. I put it down slowly, silently, because whatever was coming next, I needed to face it with absolute clarity. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow I would get answers. But that night, as I lay awake next to her, staring into the darkness, listening to her steady breathing, I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I lay there with my eyes open, staring into the dark while she breathed calmly beside me, turning occasionally, brushing her leg against mine like everything between us was still normal. Every time she moved, my whole body went rigid. I kept replaying that message over and over until the words carved themselves into the inside of my skull. Are you free tomorrow? I miss you already. Those weren't the words of a coworker, not a friend, not someone confused about boundaries. That was someone who had tasted something he wanted again. Someone confident enough to assume she'd want it too. And she did. I felt it, not from evidence yet, but from the way she had changed. The way she reacted. The way she pulled her phone close like it was oxygen. It's incredible how betrayal can make you hyper-aware of details you never cared about before. Every breath she took sounded different. Every shift in the sheets made me analyze how deeply she slept, how relaxed she was, how comfortable she felt lying next to me after spending time with someone else. The man she wanted, the man she missed, the man who wasn't me. At 5:30 a.m., I finally slid out of bed, quiet, controlled. I didn't want her to wake up. I needed a moment alone, a moment where I didn't have to pretend that nothing was happening. She turned slightly when I got up, but didn't wake. I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the closed door to our bedroom, listening to the faint hum of her breathing. She was there, but a part of her wasn't mine anymore. I made coffee in complete silence and sat at the table, staring at the steam rising from the mug. I wasn't even drinking it. I just needed something to anchor myself while I tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do. I knew I couldn't keep living in the half-light of suspicion. I needed certainty, proof, something undeniable, so clear that even she couldn't twist it into something harmless. A message preview wasn't enough. I needed everything behind that screen, but I also knew I wouldn't get it with force. She would never hand over her phone voluntarily, not with what she was hiding. I had to be patient, strategic, calculated in a way I never expected to be in my own relationship. When she finally woke and came into the kitchen, she looked tired, but not troubled. She smiled faintly when she saw me. "You're up early," she said, reaching for her cup, brushing her hand against my shoulder as she passed. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "Couldn't sleep." She looked at me for a second longer, studying my face. Did she sense something? Did she know I had seen the message? I couldn't tell. But then her phone buzzed in her hand. Her eyes dropped to the screen. Instantly, her thumb pressed the side button so fast she could have broken the habit of any honest person. Felt the pulse of each shoot through my chest. But I kept my face blank. "Work stuff," she said quickly. Before I even asked, I didn't respond. She left for work earlier than usual, claiming she had a meeting to prepare for. Her voice stayed light, but her shoulders seemed tense as she grabbed her bag. When she kissed me goodbye, her lips barely lingered. The door closed behind her, and I finally let myself breathe. For the first time in days, I felt like I could think without pretending. I walked to the living room, sat down on the couch, and stared at the place where her phone had been the night before. I could still hear that vibration in my mind. The message replayed over and over like a mocking echo. I had two choices: confront her without proof, or gather everything I needed and end the guessing. I chose the second, not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to trap her, but because I needed to know the truth before I shattered everything. I spent my entire morning planning, thinking through every detail. Timing, behavior, pattern. One thing stood out. She always showered when she came home, always left her phone on the nightstand during those 10, maybe 15 minutes. It was the only time it wasn't glued to her. This was my window, my only window. I waited the entire day for her to return. Every hour felt heavier than the last. Every minute reminded me of the message I had seen. When she finally came home, she looked different, more relaxed, brighter. Like someone who had spent the day floating instead of working. She kissed me on the cheek, too casually, and walked straight to the bathroom, pulling her hair into a bun. "Long day?" I asked, watching her reaction. She paused for half a second, half an unnecessary second. "Yeah," she said, forcing a small, tired smile. "Exhausting." A lie. My chest tightened. She closed the bathroom door and turned on the shower. I waited 5 seconds, 10, 20. Then I moved, not rushed, not nervous, focused. I walked to the nightstand, picked up her phone, and held it in my hand. My heart pounded so hard, I felt it in my teeth. Her passcode. I knew it once, but she changed it 2 months ago. My thumb hovered over the screen, thinking, what would she change it to? A date, someone's name, her birthday. Then my brain seized on something. 2 weeks ago, she joked about switching to something easier to remember, something muscle memory friendly. Her old code had been 1208. Her birthday. She wouldn't dare reuse that one. Too obvious. But muscle memory. Her lock screen wallpaper was the same image she took on our anniversary trip. Our anniversary date was at week 14. I typed it in. The phone unlocked. A shock ran through me. My hands didn't shake. I thought they would, but they didn't. I opened her messages. Her conversation with him was pinned, and the moment I tapped it, my entire world, my relationship, my trust, my sense of who she was collapsed in a single, silent breath. There were weeks of messages, weeks of small betrayals collected like dust. The tone wasn't flirty, it was intimate, warm, fearless, the kind of warmth she hadn't shown me in months. They talked about wanting each other, about hotel rooms, about moments they shared, inside jokes, plans. And then I saw it, the message from earlier, "I miss you already," and her response, sent minutes later after I had walked away from the living room. "Tomorrow works." Same time. My vision tunneled. The air felt thick. My chest tightened until it hurt. Tomorrow she planned to see him again, while living in my home, sleeping in my bed, kissing me goodbye in the morning like nothing was wrong. Something in me snapped, not loud, not explosive, quiet, silent, a clean fracture inside my ribs. I kept reading. even though every sentence cut deeper. And then I found the picture, not nude, not explicit, worse, a photo of her, smiling soft, eyes bright and expression I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She sent it to him at 10:12 p.m. the night she came home late and lied about drinks with coworkers, a timestamp that carved itself into my memory. My hands finally trembled. My breath went shallow. The room felt like it was closing in. The shower stopped. The world snapped back. I put the phone down exactly where it was. Screen off. Angle unchanged. Everything untouched. I stepped away, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my hands until they stopped shaking. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, hair dripping, she smiled at me. A soft smile. A familiar smile. A smile built on a lie. "Hey," she said. "What should we do for dinner?" I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time since I met her, I saw her clearly. Not the woman I loved. Not the woman I trusted. Just someone who had built a life on a foundation she thought I would never question. My voice came out steady. Too steady. "I'm not hungry." And in that moment, she didn't suspect a thing. Not yet. But tomorrow. Tomorrow she had plans, and I planned to be there. Not to stop her, but to end this. Silence hung between them, so heavy it felt like the air could be cut with a knife. She stood by the window, fingers clenched around the cold windowsill, while he lingered by the door, holding the handle as if unsure whether to step back inside or walk away forever. "Are you done talking?" she asked quietly, without turning around. "I thought I was," he said. "But maybe I'm not." He took a few hesitant steps toward her. Something in her shoulders trembled, fear, hope, or the instinct to run from everything she felt. "I don't want to lose you," he finally admitted. "But I can't go back to the way things were." Slowly, she turned to face him. Her eyes were tired, not from tears, but from fighting too long, too hard, with herself and with him. "You think I don't know that?" she whispered. "You think it didn't hurt me too?" He exhaled sharply, tension breaking in his chest. "All this time, I thought you were slipping away from me," he said. "And I didn't know how to hold on without breaking both of us." She took a step forward. "And all this time I waited for you to simply tell me the truth. Not hide it, not soften it, just speak." Her voice cracked, just barely. "You finally did. Too late or not, I don't know." He swallowed hard. "So, what now?" That question froze the air again. She walked past him, stopping right beside the door. For a moment he thought she would leave, but instead she reached for his hand. Not to pull him back, not to cling, just to touch, softly, honestly, without fear. "We don't go back," she said. "We don't pretend the past didn't happen. But if we walk forward, we walk together, step by step, without lies, without guessing games." Her fingers tightened around his. "Can you do that?" He met her gaze, really met it for the first time in months. "Yes," he breathed. "I can." A small, tired smile touched her lips. The kind that looked like the start of something new, fragile but real. "Then," she whispered, "let this be our last ending." "And our first beginning." He nodded, releasing the door handle at last. And as they stepped away from the doorway side by side, the air between them felt different. Not heavier, not suffocating, but alive. A future they would have to build. A future they finally chose.